Welcome to Awaken Soul, a gateway to profound near-death experiences and spiritual revelations. Here, we share true stories of those who have glimpsed the afterlife, encountered divine beings like Jesus, Mother Mary, and the Supreme Creator, and return transformed. Their journeys remind us that Earth is merely a training ground for the soul to grow in wisdom, compassion, and love. Beyond this 3D world lies our true home. Are you ready to awaken? And remember, subscribe now to watch authentic NDE videos every day and uncover the truth beyond this world. A prophetic warning of World War III and the impending fall of tyrannical leaders in 2025. Daniel Walker was a man of facts, a journalist who dealt in the concrete realities of the world. He wrote about politics, international relations, and the messy, often contradictory narratives of human events. He prided himself on his objectivity, his skepticism, his ability to dissect complex situations and present them in a clear, concise, and unbiased manner. He did not believe in miracles, divine interventions, or prophecies. He believed in evidence and verifiable data and the power of human reason. He worked for a respected national newspaper in Washington, D.C., a city that thrived on power, intrigue, and the constant churn of political maneuvering. He had spent years covering the corridors of power, interviewing presidents, prime ministers, and diplomats, witnessing firsthand the machinations of global politics. He had become, over time, increasingly disillusioned, cynical about the motives of those in power, and pessimistic about the future of the world. His personal life reflected his professional detachment. He was divorced, his marriage having crumbled under the weight of his demanding career and his emotional unavailability. He had a daughter, Sarah, whom he saw rarely, a source of quiet guilt and regret. He had few close friends, his social life revolving around work colleagues and the occasional, unsatisfying date. He had recently been working on a series of articles about the growing tensions between the United States, Russia, and China. He had interviewed experts, analyzed intelligence reports, and written extensively about the potential for a major global conflict. He saw the world as a chessboard with powerful players vying for dominance, driven by national interests, economic competition, and historical grievances. He did not see any divine hand guiding events, any overarching plan or purpose. He saw only the chaotic, often destructive, interplay of human ambition and folly. One evening, after a long day at the office, Daniel was driving home, his mind still preoccupied with the complexities of his latest article. He was stopped at a red light, listening to a news report about escalating tensions in the South China Sea. Suddenly, he felt a sharp, searing pain in his head, a blinding explosion of light behind his eyes. He gasped, clutching at his head, his vision blurring. He slumped over the steering wheel, the sounds of the city fading into a distant hum. The pain vanished as quickly as it had come. It was replaced by a sensation of weightlessness, of floating free from his body. He looked down and saw his own body slumped over the steering wheel of his car, his face pale and lifeless. He saw the flashing lights of emergency vehicles approaching, the growing crowd of onlookers gathering on the sidewalk. He felt no fear, no panic. A profound sense of calm washed over him, a tranquility he had never experienced before. The sounds of the sirens, the shouts of the bystanders, the honking of horns, all faded into a distant, muffled hum. He was aware of a presence beside him, a gentle, guiding force. He didn't see anyone, but he felt a warmth, a love that was both familiar and overwhelming. He began to move, not of his own volition, but drawn by an irresistible force. He was rising, floating upwards, effortlessly passing through the roof of his car, the night sky above. He was moving through a tunnel, a darkness that was not frightening, but rather comforting. Like being enveloped in a soft, warm embrace. The darkness began to recede, replaced by a soft, radiant light at the end of the tunnel. The light grew brighter, more intense, yet it didn't hurt his eyes. It was a light unlike anything he had ever seen, a light that seemed to emanate from within, a light that was both light and love. The sense of peace intensified, becoming almost unbearable in its beauty. All his earthly concerns, his anxieties about his career, his failed marriage, his estrangement from his daughter, all vanished completely. He felt whole, complete, loved in a way that transcended human understanding. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he was going home. The light enveloped him completely, and Daniel found himself in a realm that defied all earthly description. It wasn't a place with physical dimensions, but rather a state of being, a dimension of pure energy and consciousness. Colors existed that he had never seen before, vibrant and alive, resonating with an inner light. Sounds were not heard, but felt, harmonies that vibrated deep within his soul. He was not alone. He saw figures, shimmering and radiant, beings of light that emanated love and compassion. He recognized his grandmother, a woman of deep faith who had passed away many years earlier. She embraced him, her love wrapping around him like a warm blanket. He felt a sense of forgiveness, of understanding, that he had never fully experienced in their earthly relationship. Then, a presence approached him, a being of light so intense, so overwhelming, that Daniel felt a sense of awe and reverence. He knew, instinctively, that this was a divine being, a messenger of God, an emissary from a realm beyond human comprehension. The being did not speak in words, but communicated directly to Daniel's mind, its thoughts flowing into his consciousness like a river of pure light. It explained that Daniel had been brought to this realm to receive a revelation, a message of vital importance for humanity. You have been chosen, the being conveyed, to witness the unfolding of events that will shape the future of your world. You have been chosen because of your skepticism, because of your ability to analyze and communicate, and because of your underlying desire for truth. Daniel, despite his lifelong disbelief in anything supernatural, felt no doubt, no fear. The overwhelming love and peace of this realm had dissolved his skepticism, opening his heart and mind to a reality that transcended his previous understanding. He was ready to receive the message, to witness the prophecy, to understand the divine plan. The divine being led Daniel to a vantage point, a shift in perspective that allowed him to observe the first part of the revelation. It was a vision of the future, a depiction of events that were yet to unfold on Earth. He saw images of global conflict, a war that engulfed the world in flames. It wasn't a conventional war, with clearly defined battle lines and national armies. It was a chaotic, multifaceted conflict fueled by ancient hatreds, political rivalries, economic competition, and religious extremism. He saw cities reduced to rubble, populations displaced, millions of people suffering and dying. He saw the earth itself groaning under the weight of human violence, the environment ravaged by pollution and destruction. The vision was not presented as a celebration of violence, but as a stark warning, a depiction of the consequences of humanity's choices. It was a portrayal of the destructive power of hatred, division, and the pursuit of power at all costs. The war to start in the Middle East. The guide explained that this war was not inevitable, but it was a highly likely outcome if humanity continued on its current path. It was a consequence of the accumulated negativity, the greed, the hatred, the fear that had been allowed to fester and grow in the hearts of men. This is not the will of God, the being conveyed. This is the result of human choices, of the failure to embrace love, compassion, and unity. But even in the midst of this darkness, there is hope. There is always the possibility of change, of transformation, of redemption. The vision was not meant to instill fear, but to awaken Daniel, and through him, others, to the urgency of the situation, to the need for a profound shift in consciousness, a turning away from the path of destruction and towards the path of peace. The vision shifted focusing on 3 specific individuals: Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, and Kim Jong-un. Daniel recognized them as the leaders of Russia, China, and North Korea, respectively. He saw them not as political figures, but as symbols of tyranny, of authoritarian rule, of the suppression of human freedom and the pursuit of power through violence and oppression. The divine being revealed to Daniel that these 3 leaders would die suddenly in the year 2025. Their deaths would not be the result of assassination or military action, but of divine intervention, a removal of obstacles to the unfolding of a new era of peace. Their time on earth is coming to an end, the being conveyed. Their hearts are hardened, their minds closed to the light. They have chosen the path of darkness, and they will be swept away by the tide of change. This was not presented as a cause for celebration or vengeance, but as a necessary step in the divine plan. Their deaths were not seen as a punishment, but as a release, both for themselves and for the world. Their souls would continue their journey, facing the consequences of their actions in the spiritual realm, but their earthly influence would be extinguished. Their countries will go through a period of change. The being emphasized that this was not about glorifying death or violence, but about understanding the spiritual laws that govern the universe. Actions have consequences, choices have repercussions, and those who sow hatred and division will ultimately reap a harvest of sorrow and destruction. The removal of these leaders was presented as a clearing of the way, a removal of obstacles to the emergence of a more just and peaceful world order. The scene shifted once more, and Daniel was shown a vision of the future after the war and the deaths of the tyrannical leaders. It was a vision of hope, of healing, of a world transformed. He saw a world where cooperation had replaced conflict, where nations worked together for the common good, where resources were shared equitably, and where the environment was protected and restored. He saw a world where poverty, hunger, and disease had been eradicated, where technology was used for the benefit of all, and where human potential was unleashed. He saw a world where people lived in harmony with each other and with nature, where spiritual values were honored and where love, compassion, and understanding prevailed. It was a world of peace, prosperity, and justice, a world where the divine spark within each individual was recognized and celebrated. The guide explained that this golden age was not a utopian fantasy, but a potential future, a possibility that could be realized if humanity chose to embrace love, unity, and cooperation. It was not something that would happen automatically, but something that required conscious effort, a commitment to living in accordance with the principles of truth, justice, and compassion. It will not come fast. It needs time. This is the promise, the being conveyed. This is the potential that lies within humanity. But it is not a guarantee. It is a choice. It is a challenge. It is a call to action. The vision was not meant to create complacency, but to inspire hope, to motivate action, and to remind Daniel, and through him, all of humanity, that a better world was possible, that the future was not fixed, and that every individual had a role to play in creating the reality they desired. The vision ceased, and Daniel felt the familiar wrenching sensation, the pulling back into his physical body. The pain returned, intense and overwhelming, but it was accompanied by a profound sense of awe and responsibility. He was back in the hospital, surrounded by the beeping monitors and the concerned faces of the medical staff. He was alive, miraculously alive, but he was also profoundly changed. He carried within him a knowledge that was both exhilarating and terrifying, a prophecy that he knew would be met with skepticism and ridicule. He tried to explain what he had seen and heard, but his words seemed inadequate, failing to capture the immensity of his experience. The doctors attributed his accounts to the lingering effects of the brain injury, to hallucinations caused by the trauma and the medication. Mr. Walker, Dr. Stevens, his neurologist, said patiently, "You've had a very close brush with death. Your brain was deprived of oxygen for a significant period. It's perfectly normal to experience unusual sensations, vivid dreams, even what you might perceive as visions. But these are not real in the way we understand reality. They are products of your brain's attempt to make sense of a traumatic event. Daniel understood their perspective. He knew that his stories sounded fantastical, even to his own ears. He was a journalist, a man of facts and evidence, and yet he was now claiming to have received a divine prophecy, a revelation about the future of the world. He felt the weight of this knowledge, the burden of responsibility. He knew that he couldn't simply keep this to himself, that he had a duty to share the message he had received. But he also knew that he would face disbelief, ridicule, and even hostility. He was caught between the undeniable to him truth of his experience and the overwhelming skepticism of the world around him. He was discharged from the hospital a few weeks later, physically healed, but emotionally and spiritually transformed. He returned to his apartment, to his life, but everything felt different. The world seemed both more fragile and more precious, more beautiful and more terrifying. He was carrying a secret, a prophecy, a burden of knowledge that weighed heavily on his soul. Daniel began his mission cautiously, tentatively. He knew he couldn't simply burst onto the scene, proclaiming himself a prophet and announcing the impending deaths of world leaders. He would be dismissed as a madman, a crank, or worse. He started by writing. He poured his experience, his visions, and the message he had received into a lengthy manuscript. He described his NDE in detail, the encounter with the divine being, the prophecy of war, the fall of the tyrants, and the promise of a golden age. He wrote with passion, with conviction, but also with a conscious effort to ground his story and his journalistic training, to present the information as clearly and objectively as possible. Even though he knew the subject matter defied objectivity, he sent the manuscript to several publishers, but it was rejected. They found the story unbelievable, to fantastical, to politically charged. They advised him to tone down the prophetic elements, to focus on the personal aspects of his NDE, to make it more palatable to a mainstream audience. He tried to share his story with his friends, his family, his ex-wife. Their reactions ranged from polite disbelief to outright concern for his mental health. His ex-wife, Sarah, urged him to seek therapy, to talk to a professional about his delusions. His daughter, confused and frightened by his sudden change in demeanor, became withdrawn and distant. He considered trying to contact government officials, to warn them about the impending war and the prophesied deaths of the leaders. But he knew that such an attempt would be futile, even dangerous. He would be dismissed as a crackpot, a security risk, or worse. He found some solace in online communities dedicated to NDEs and spiritual experiences. He shared his story anonymously, finding a degree of understanding and support from others who had had similar encounters. But even within these groups, his specific prophecy was met with skepticism and debate. He felt increasingly isolated, frustrated by his inability to communicate the urgency of his message. He began to question his own sanity, wondering if the doctors were right, if his NDE was simply a hallucination, a product of his injured brain. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had seen what he had seen. He had heard what he had heard. He had felt the overwhelming love of the divine, the certainty of the prophecy, the weight of the responsibility he now carried. He couldn't deny his experience, even if the whole world dismissed him. He had to find a way to be heard, to share the message, to prepare humanity for the events that were to come. He just didn't know how. As 2025 approached, Daniel watched the world with a growing sense of unease and anticipation. Global tensions were escalating, conflicts were brewing in various hotspots, and the political rhetoric was becoming increasingly inflammatory. He saw the signs, the echoes of the visions he had witnessed during his NDE. He continued to write, to speak, to share his message whenever and wherever he could. But he did so with a new sense of humility and discernment. He no longer tried to convince skeptics or force his beliefs on others. He focused on living his life in accordance with the principles he had learned: love, compassion, service, and faith. He quit his job at the newspaper, feeling that he could no longer contribute to the cycle of negativity and sensationalism that dominated the media. He used his savings to start a small nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting peace, understanding, and cooperation between different cultures and religions. He volunteered at a local homeless shelter, offering food, clothing, and a listening ear to those in need. He became involved in environmental activism, working to raise awareness about climate change and promote sustainable practices. He sought out opportunities to connect with people from different backgrounds, to build bridges of understanding and break down the walls of division. He found that his actions spoke louder than his words. By living a life of service, by embodying the principles of love and compassion, he was able to touch the lives of others, to inspire hope, and to create a ripple effect of positive change. Then, the events of 2025 began to unfold, mirroring, with chilling accuracy, the prophecy he had received. First, news broke of Vladimir Putin's sudden death. The official cause was reported as a heart attack, but rumors of foul play and conspiracy theories abounded. Weeks later, Xi Jinping suffered a massive stroke, leaving him incapacitated and effectively ending his rule. The transition of power in China was tumultuous, marked by internal power struggles and uncertainty. Finally, Kim Jong-un died unexpectedly, reportedly from complications of a pre-existing medical condition. The news sent shockwaves through the international community, creating a power vacuum in North Korea and raising fears of instability in the region. Daniel watched these events unfold with a mixture of awe, sadness, and a profound sense of validation. His prophecy, the one he had doubted and struggled to share, was coming true. But he felt no sense of triumph, no "I told you so" satisfaction. He understood that these deaths were not cause for celebration, but rather a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the consequences of choices. The world did not magically transform into a utopia. The deaths of the three leaders created chaos and uncertainty. Power struggles erupted, conflicts intensified, and the threat of a wider war still loomed. But amidst the turmoil, something began to shift. The old order, the structures of power based on oppression and control, began to crumble. New leaders emerged, some driven by ambition and self-interest, but others inspired by a genuine desire for peace and cooperation. A global movement for change began to gain momentum, fueled by a growing awareness of the interconnectedness of all things and the need for a more just and sustainable world. Daniel found himself at the center of this movement, not as a leader or a prophet, but as a facilitator, a connector, a voice of reason and compassion. He shared his story, not as a prediction of the future, but as a testament to the power of faith, the reality of the spiritual realm, and the potential for humanity to choose a different path. He found peace not in the fulfillment of the prophecy, but in living a life of service, in embodying the principles of love and unity, and in contributing to the creation of a better world. One act of kindness, one moment of connection, one step of faith at a time. The Golden Age was not a destination, but a journey, a process of continuous growth and transformation, a collective awakening to the divine spark within each individual. And Daniel, the former skeptic, the reluctant prophet, was now a participant in that awakening, a beacon of hope in a world that desperately needed it.